The alien emissary's skin shimmered like oil on water as she stepped into the human diplomatic station. Lieutenant Greg Dalton had seen 1,000 species in his 5 years manning the Outer Rim, but the Vekthari were something else entirely. They moved like liquid poetry, their bodies shifting through impossible angles that made his eyes water if he stared too long. "You will present your credentials," she said, her voice a chorus of overlapping frequencies that his translator struggled to parse. Greg handed her the data chip containing Earth's formal greeting. Protocol dictated he remain silent, professional, distant. 3 failed first contacts in the last year had taught humanity that much. Don't engage. Don't assume. Don't risk another war. The emissary absorbed the chip into her palm. Her expression, if she had one, remained unreadable. The station's atmospheric processors hummed in the background, filling the silence with mechanical white noise. "Your species confuses us," she said after a moment. "You broadcast mathematics and chemistry, yet your vessels carry weapons powerful enough to shatter moons. We hope we never have to use them," Greg replied carefully. "Hope is not strategy. No, but it's all we've got sometimes." Something in her posture shifted. The translator offered no insight into what that meant. Greg's hand drifted closer to his sidearm, just in case. The Vekthari had destroyed colonies before. Whole systems, wiped clean because someone said the wrong thing at the wrong time. "I have studied your entertainment transmissions," she continued. "Your species finds humor in contradiction, in suffering, in failure. Sometimes laughter is how we cope. Then cope with this." She extended a crystalline appendage toward him. "I find your presence aesthetically pleasing. Your species designation would call this attraction." Greg's heart hammered against his ribs. First contact protocol said nothing about this. Nothing at all. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "I like you too," he said. Because what else could he say? The emissary didn't laugh. Her body began to pulse with light, patterns racing across her surface in waves of impossible color. The station's alarms shrieked to life. Emergency bulkheads slammed down. Greg's communicator exploded with panicked voices from command. The emissary was changing, growing, her form expanding to fill the chamber. But she wasn't attacking. She was transforming into something else entirely. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, and her voice held something that might have been joy or might have been terror. The walls of the station began to dissolve around them. Asterix. File name. Asterix, she didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable. Text task. Greg's training kicked in through the chaos. He dove behind the reinforcement panel as reality itself seemed to peel away like wet paper. The emissary's transformation accelerated, her body splitting into fractal patterns that hurt to perceive. Each fragment reflected a different version of the chamber, of him, of everything. "Command! I need immediate evac!" he shouted into his comm. Static answered him. Then a voice distorted and broken. "Dalton, what did you do?" The entire sector is lighting up like a supernova. Every Vekthari ship within 10 light years just changed course toward your position. The emissary's voice surrounded him now, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Your species does not understand. We do not process attraction as you do. When a Vekthari acknowledges desire, we do not simply feel it. We become it. We transform." "Transform into what?" Greg pressed himself against the wall as the floor beneath him turned transparent. Below, he could see stars, actual stars, impossibly close. "A bridge, a beacon, a declaration to all of my kind that I have chosen." The station shuddered. Through the dissolving walls, Greg saw them arriving. Vekthari ships, hundreds of them, materializing from faster-than-light jumps in perfect synchronization. They formed a sphere around the station, their hulls rippling with the same patterns that covered the emissary's transformed body. "Chosen what?" Greg's voice cracked. "Chosen me? Chosen to merge our species?" The words hit him like a physical blow. Humanity had fought 3 wars in the last decade to prevent forced integration with alien cultures. The Dominion had tried to absorb Earth's colonies through genetic manipulation. The Hive Collective had attempted to assimilate human consciousness into their network. Both times, humanity had barely survived, and now this. "I didn't consent to that," Greg said, forcing steel into his voice. Neither did my species. Consent is a human construct. We Vecthari operate on resonance. You express desire. I resonated. The transformation has begun and cannot be stopped. More alarms. Greg's tactical display flickered to life on his wrist unit, showing something that made his blood run cold. The Vectary ships weren't just surrounding the station. They were changing, too. Their hulls morphing into organic structures that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Command, are you seeing this? A new voice cut through the static. Admiral Kate Morrison, commander of the Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Dalton, we're tracking 73 Earth vessels en route to your position. The Vecthari just broadcast their intention across all channels. They're calling it the Resonance Protocol. They say you and their emissary have initiated a species-wide bonding event. I just said I liked her! Well, apparently that was enough. Our xenobiologists are going into cardiac arrest trying to figure out what this means. Best guess? The Vecthari don't do casual relationships. When they commit at a civilizational level. The emissary's form stabilized somewhat, coalescing into a shape that was almost humanoid but still fundamentally alien. She reached toward Greg, her hand now solid enough to touch. Do not fear this, she said. My people have waited 3,000 cycles for resonance with another species. You have given us what we thought impossible. And what exactly have I given you? Hope. Understanding. A future where we are not alone in our perception of beauty. Greg stared at her hand, suspended between them like a question waiting for an answer. Outside, the combined fleets of two species held their fire, waiting to see what would happen next, waiting for him to decide the fate of billions. His fingers twitched toward hers. Then he heard it. A transmission, faint but clear, coming from the approaching Earth fleet. A single message repeating on loop. Lieutenant Dalton, this is Captain Ryan Fletcher aboard the USS Defiant. Do not make physical contact. I repeat, do not make physical contact. We have new intel on the Vecthari Resonance Protocol. It's not what they're telling you. Greg's hand froze. The emissary's eyes, if they were eyes, fixed on him with an intensity that made the air between them crackle. You hesitate, she said. Why? Because I've learned that when something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. The light patterns on her skin flickered, dimmed. Do you doubt my sincerity? I doubt my understanding of what sincerity even means to your species. Outside, the first human ships dropped out of faster than light, their weapons hot but not firing. The standoff had begun. And Greg stood at the center of it, his decision capable of starting neither a new era of cooperation or the bloodiest war humanity had ever known. Asterix, file name, Asterix. She didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable. .txt. Captain Fletcher's voice crackled through again, urgent and sharp. Dalton, listen carefully. The Resonance Protocol isn't a merger, it's a conversion. Every human within their sphere of influence will be rewritten at a genetic level. You'll still be conscious, still be you, but your body will become Vecthari. They're not seeking partnership, they're seeking reproduction. The emissary tilted her head, a gesture that felt mockingly human. Your captain speaks truth wrapped in fear. Yes, we rewrite. Yes, we transform. But he fails to mention what she become. Stronger. Longer lived, capable of perceiving 17 dimensions instead of your limited 4. That's not his choice to make, Greg said. It's not mine either. Yet you triggered it. The resonance cannot be undone. Greg's mind raced. The station continued to dissolve around him, the Vecthari ships drawing closer. He could see human vessels taking defensive positions, their point defense systems tracking targets. One wrong move and this entire sector would erupt into violence. Then, I'll stop it another way. Greg pulled his sidearm, aimed it at his own temple. Every Vecthari ship simultaneously pulsed red. The emissary's form destabilized, fragments of her scattering like startled birds before reforming. You would destroy yourself? Her voice carried something new. Confusion. Maybe even fear. If it saves my species from forced assimilation? Yes. That is illogical. You express desire for connection. I express desire for you, one person. Not for my entire species to be absorbed into yours against their will. The emissary went still. The pulsing patterns on her skin slowed, deepened, became something that looked almost like thought. Around them, the Vekthari fleet held position, waiting, calculating. Fletcher's voice cut in again. Dalton, negative on the suicide play. New data just came through from the science division. If you die while she's in transformation state, it could trigger a cascade failure. Every Vekthari in range would experience catastrophic neural collapse. We'd be looking at billions of deaths. So I'm trapped. Greg kept the gun steady. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. Not necessarily. A new voice joined the channel. Dr. Linda Hayes, chief xenobiologist for the Outer Rim. The Vekthari resonance protocol requires mutual sustained contact to complete, but it also has a negotiation phase built in. They've never told us about it because no species has ever pushed back before. The emissary's form sharpened, her attention laser-focused on Greg. The human scientist speaks of old ways, before we learn that most species prefer domination to transformation. So there is another option, Greg said, lowering the gun slightly. There was, centuries ago, before we abandoned hope of finding equals. Show me. The emissary extended both hands this time, palms up. The negotiation requires that we both risk everything. You will enter my transformation state. I will enter yours. We will experience each other's existence completely. If either of us cannot accept what we find, the resonance shatters. Both species remain separate. And if we both accept, then the choice passes to our peoples. Not forced, not mandated, offered. Fletcher's voice was tight with tension. Dalton, we have no data on this. You could be walking into a trap. Or I could be walking into first contact that doesn't end in war. Greg looked at the emissary, really looked at her. Past the alien geometry, past the incomprehensible biology, he saw something he recognized. Loneliness. The same thing he'd felt every day on this isolated station, watching species interact while humanity stayed locked behind its walls. What happens to me if I refuse? He asked. The transformation continues without negotiation. Your species becomes Vekthari. All of them. And if I accept the negotiation, you may die. I may die. We may both emerge changed in ways neither of us can predict, but free will remains intact. The human fleet had fully assembled now, 97 ships against hundreds of Vekthari. The firepower disparity was laughable. Earth would lose this fight if it came to violence. Lose badly. Greg's hand shook, not from fear, from the weight of what came next. Dr. Hayes, he said slowly, in your professional opinion, is she telling the truth? A long pause. Then, the linguistic patterns match historical Vekthari texts we've recovered, the ones from before they became expansionist. I think she's offering you something real, Dalton, something they haven't offered anyone in a very long time. Admiral Morrison, Greg continued, your call. Do I take the risk? The Admiral's response was immediate. Son, I've been in command for 23 years. I've authorized strikes that killed thousands. I've made peace with butchers because it was strategically necessary. And I've never once had to make a decision like this. She exhaled slowly. But if there's even a chance we can end this without bloodshed, without assimilation, without war, take it. That's an order. Greg holstered his weapon. The emissary's skin brightened, patterns accelerating across her surface. One condition, Greg said. Before we start, you tell me your name, your real name, not your title or your designation, who you actually are. The emissary's form rippled. When she spoke, her voice was singular, personal, stripped of the chorus effect. Liss. Greg, he replied. He took her hands. The universe inverted. Asterix file name. Asterix, she didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable. Text. Greg's consciousness shattered into 17 pieces. He existed in dimensions his human brain couldn't process, perceiving time as a physical object he could reach out and touch. He saw his own birth and death simultaneously, watched himself as a child, an old man, a scatter of atoms drifting through empty space. The station, the fleets, everything collapsed into mathematical certainties that sang with terrifying beauty. Then he felt Liss, not saw, not heard. felt her presence woven through the fabric of reality itself. She was old, ancient beyond human comprehension. She had witnessed stars ignite and die, had seen civilizations rise from primordial oceans and collapse into forgotten dust. The Vecthari didn't experience time linearly. They swam through it, moving between moments like humans walked between rooms. And she was alone. The weight of her isolation hit him like a collapsing star. The Vecthari were a species of individuals who existed in collective perception, each one aware of all the others across space and time, their thoughts interweaving in patterns of impossible complexity. But they had never found another species capable of joining that pattern. Every attempt at connection had failed. Every other race either couldn't perceive what the Vecthari offered or chose to reject it violently, until Greg said 4 simple words: "I like you too." Those words had resonated across every dimension the Vecthari inhabited. A frequency they'd waited millennia to hear, proof that somewhere in the universe another consciousness existed that could appreciate beauty the way they did. But Greg also felt her fear. The Vecthari had tried gentleness before, tried patience, tried waiting for other species to understand. And those species had weaponized that patience, studying the Vecthari until they found weaknesses, then striking. 3 times Lys's people had nearly been exterminated by races they'd tried to befriend, so they'd changed. Became conquerors instead of suitors, took what they wanted rather than asking. It had kept them alive, but left them empty. Greg understood now. The forced assimilation wasn't cruelty, it was desperation. Then the perspective shifted, and Greg saw himself through Lys's perception. He was aflame, brief, brilliant, burning with intensity that made her ache. Humans lived such short lives, experienced such narrow bands of reality, yet somehow packed more emotion into their decades than Vecthari felt in centuries. Greg's loneliness on the station wasn't just isolation. It was longing, a desperate hunger to connect that he'd buried under protocol and professionalism. Lys felt his childhood, a father who'd died in the Dominion War, a mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him fed. The academy where he had excelled because excellence was the only way to honor their sacrifice. The Outer Rim posting he'd requested because he wanted to be the bridge between species, wanted to prove that humanity could be more than just survivors. She felt his attraction to her, not despite her alienness, but because of it. He'd looked at her and seen wonder instead of threat, possibility instead of danger. And she felt his terror, the same fear that drove the Vecthari. That this moment of connection would be destroyed by forces beyond his control, that his species would reject what he'd found, that he'd have to choose between his people and this impossible, beautiful thing taking shape between them. The negotiation pulled them deeper. Greg experienced Lys's first memory, a moment of singular awareness as she separated from the collective consciousness of her birthing pool, becoming an individual while remaining part of the whole. The joy of that paradox, being both one and many, flooded through him. Lys experienced Greg's first kiss, a girl named Sophie behind the Academy Gymnasium, both of them terrified and excited, the taste of cherry lip gloss and the electric thrill of human touch. The simplicity of that moment, its pure physical immediacy, stunned her. They traded experiences faster now. Greg felt Lys compose a symphony in 17 dimensions, watched her paint with gravity waves, saw her dance through quantum foam. Lys felt Greg laugh at a stupid joke, watched him cry at a sunset, experienced his rage when a friend died senselessly. The gulf between them was impossible. Vecthari and human. Ancient and ephemeral, multidimensional and limited. But the connection was real. Greg pulled back first, his human consciousness struggling to maintain coherence. He existed in his body again, standing in the half-dissolved station with Lys's hands in his. But he was changed. His eyes could see more now. Not 17 dimensions, but maybe 5, maybe 6. Colors existed that had no names. Sounds rang in frequencies his ears couldn't detect, but his mind could perceive. Lys had changed too. Her form stabilized into something more human, more solid. She'd voluntarily reduced her dimensional perception to match his, binding herself to linearity so they could exist in the same moment. This is what negotiation means, she said, and her voice was singular now, permanently changed. I have shown you everything. You have shown me everything. Now we choose. Choose what? Greg's voice was hoarse. Whether the cost is worth the connection. Around them, both fleets held formation, waiting. Every human in every Vectharian range could feel the resonance now, a vibration in reality itself. If I say yes, Greg said slowly, humanity gets a choice. Not forced transformation, not assimilation, just the option to experience what we just experienced. Yes, and those who choose yes will become as I am now, reduced but present, limited but real. And if I say no, the resonance breaks. I return to what I was. You return to what you were. Our species remains separate. Forever. Greg thought about his father, buried on a colony world humanity had fought to keep free. His mother, retired now on Earth, still sending him messages he rarely answered. Fletcher and Morrison and Hayes and all the other humans who'd trusted him to make this call. He thought about Liz, about to return to an eternity of isolation. There's a third option, he said. Tasteric. File name, applicant. She didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable.tx. Liz's form flickered with uncertainty. There is no third option. The negotiation allows only acceptance or rejection. Wrong. Greg's voice carried a confidence he didn't entirely feel. You showed me your history. I saw the pattern. Every time the Vecthari tried to connect with another species, you approached it as binary. Join us or don't, transform or remain separate. You never considered actual partnership. Partnership requires equivalence. Humans cannot perceive as we do. Not naturally. But you just proved perception can be taught, shared, negotiated. Greg squeezed her hands tighter. What if instead of humans becoming Victari, or staying purely human, we created something new? A hybrid culture where both species maintain their identity, but gain the ability to understand each other. The patterns on Liz's skin stuttered, stopped, restarted in configurations Greg had never seen. That is untested. Dangerous. The resonance field is already established. Attempting to modify it mid-protocol could destroy both of us. Or it could work. Greg looked past her at the assembled fleets. Dr. Hayes, you still monitoring? Every word, Lieutenant. And holy hell, you might be onto something. If the Vecthari resonance is programmable and human neurology is adaptable enough, theoretically you could create a bridge protocol. Let humans opt into temporary shared perception without permanent transformation. Admiral Morrison's voice cut in. Temporary how? Think of it like a communication device. Humans could enter Vecthari perception space voluntarily, experience it, then return to normal consciousness. The Vecthari would have to meet us halfway, maintaining limited forms like Liz is doing now. Both species stay sovereign but gain access to each other. The collective will never accept this. Liz's voice carried pain. My people have spent centuries building walls to protect themselves. They will not voluntarily limit their perception for humans they do not trust. Then, we start small. Greg pulled one hand free, tapped his comm. Fletcher, status on that science vessel you mentioned last month. The one studying quantum entanglement. The Meridian. She's 3 days out, but I can have her here in 18 hours if I authorize emergency jump. Do it. And Admiral, I need authorization to establish a joint research station. Vecthari and human scientists working together under neutral oversight. We prove the concept works before we ask anyone to commit. Morrison was silent for 5 long seconds. Then, you're asking me to gamble our entire defensive posture on an experiment. I'm asking you to choose hope over fear. Isn't that what got humanity through the last 3 wars? Another pause. Greg could almost hear the Admiral's teeth grinding. Authorized. But Dalton, if this goes sideways, history's gonna remember your name for all the wrong reasons. Better than being remembered for starting a war we couldn't win. Liz's other hand trembled in his grip. Even if your leadership agrees, mine will not. The Vecthari consensus operates on absolute majority. I am one voice among billions. They will overrule me and proceed with forced assimilation. Not if you give them what they actually want. Greg met her eyes, those impossible multidimensional organs that he could now partly comprehend. You said your people have been alone for millennia, that every attempt at connection failed. Show them this moment. Show them what we just shared. Let them feel that someone finally understood them. The consensus does not operate on emotion, doesn't it? I was inside your head, Liz. I felt what you felt. The Vekthari aren't cold calculators. You're artists. Philosophers. You crave beauty and meaning just like humans do. You've just been hurt so many times you forgot how to ask for it, gently. Liz's entire form shuddered. The resonance field around them pulsed, sending waves of sensation through both fleets. Greg felt it through his enhanced perception. Billions of Vekthari minds touching the edges of what he and Liz had experienced. Curiosity, a hunger, and beneath it all, that terrible loneliness he'd felt from Liz, multiplied across an entire civilization. They are listening, Liz whispered. The consensus is examining our negotiation. They feel what I feel. Then tell them the truth. Tell them humans are terrified but willing. Tell them we'll meet them halfway if they'll do the same. Tell them this doesn't have to be conquest. It can be conversation. The Vekthari ships began to change, not transforming for assimilation, but reconfiguring. Their weapon ports closed. Their hulls shifted to display patterns of light that Greg's expanded perception recognized as language. Questions. Hundreds of questions pouring from a species that had forgotten how to simply ask. Fletcher's voice carried barely restrained panic. Dalton, the Vekthari are broadcasting on all channels. They're asking for volunteers, humans willing to enter a trial, perception exchange. They're promising safe return and full autonomy. How many ships are responding? 17 so far. No, 23. Dalton, they're not military vessels. They're science ships. Explorer crews. The people most likely to take a risk on first contact. Greg felt his heart hammer. This could still collapse. One trigger-happy captain, one Vekthari who decided patience was weakness, one misunderstanding and the shooting would start. But it didn't. Instead, the science vessels began moving forward, slowly, carefully, each one broadcasting their intentions in clear language, requesting permission to dock with Vekthari ships, asking questions about the perception exchange process, treating this like what it was supposed to be all along, first contact. Liz's hands tightened on Greg's. They are accepting. The consensus is fracturing into debate, but the majority is shifting. They want to believe this is possible, then make it possible. Greg smiled. You and me, we're the proof of concept. Let's show both our species that different doesn't mean incompatible. And if we fail, then we fail together. Which is still better than succeeding alone. Liz pulled him closer. The resonance field intensified, but it felt different now. Not forced, not consuming. Inviting. She pressed her forehead against his, and for a moment, Greg existed fully in both human and Vekthari perception simultaneously. He saw the future. Not with certainty, but with possibility. Humans and Vekthari learning from each other, sharing art, philosophy, science, some humans choosing permanent transformation, some Vekthari choosing permanent limitation, most simply choosing connection. It was messy, complicated, uncertain. It was beautiful. File name. Absence file name asterisk. She didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable. .txt. 3 months later, Greg stood in what used to be an abandoned mining station and was now humanity's first joint embassy. The Meridian had arrived on schedule, and what started as 18 hours of desperate negotiation had become something nobody predicted. It worked. The perception bridge functioned exactly as Dr. Hayes theorized. Humans could enter Vekthari dimensional space for controlled periods, experience their reality, then return unchanged. The Vekthari, in turn, could compress themselves into human-compatible forms and experience linear time, physical sensation, the strange beauty of limitation. Volunteers from both species cycled through daily. Some stayed minutes, others stayed hours. A few requested extended sessions, pushing the boundaries of what the technology could handle, and the cultural exchange exploded. Wektathari scientists experienced human music and wept at its emotional directness. Human artists entered multidimensional perception and created works that couldn't exist in normal space. Philosophers from both species argued about consciousness and meaning in debates that spanned dimensions, but it wasn't perfect. Greg watched through the embassy's observation window as another group prepared for perception exchange. 12 humans, 20 Vekthari, all nervous and excited. He recognized the feeling. He'd done this 73 times now, each session leaving him more changed than the last. His body was still human. DNA tests confirmed it. But his mind had adapted in ways Dr. Hayes was still trying to document. He could perceive 5 dimensions consistently now, sometimes 6 when he concentrated. Colors existed in his vision that had no names. He heard harmonics in normal conversation that made speech feel like music. The cost was isolation from baseline humans. He tried going home on leave last month. Earth felt flat to him now. Conversations seemed shallow. His mother had looked at him with worry in her eyes, recognizing that something fundamental had shifted in her son. "You are troubled." Liz materialized beside him, her form solid and human-shaped as she preferred when they were alone. She'd spent so much time in limited perception that the consensus was concerned. Some called her compromised. Others called her a traitor to Vekthari nature. "Just thinking about adaptation costs," Greg said. "Humans who do too many exchanges start losing connection with their own species. Vekthari who limit themselves too long start losing dimensional range permanently. The bridge has consequences." "We knew this. Knowing and experiencing are different things." Greg turned to face her. "We've got protests on 3 human colonies now. People calling this infiltration by another name. Claiming the Vekthari are changing us slowly instead of all at once. Are they wrong?" The question hung between them like a blade. Greg wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to defend what they'd built. But Liz had taught him that honest evaluation required uncomfortable truth. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. 6 months ago I was fully human, now I'm something else. Not Vekthari, but not purely human either. Is that evolution or erosion? Liz reached for his hand, a gesture she'd adopted from human custom. "The consensus debates the same question. We have Vekthari who spend so much time in human perception that they can no longer fully rejoin the collective consciousness. They are isolated within our unity. Some see this as pollution of our nature. So we're both changing in ways that scare our own people." "Yes," Greg squeezed her hand. 3 months of constant contact had created something between them that neither species had adequate language for. More than friendship, not quite human romance. Not quite Vekthari resonance, something new that existed in the space they'd created. Fletcher's voice crackled over the station comm. "Dalton, we've got a situation. The Prometheus just jumped in system with a full battle group. Admiral Morrison is requesting immediate conference." Greg's stomach dropped. The Prometheus was Earth's flagship, and battle groups didn't arrive for friendly visits. "Patch her through." Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, and she looked exhausted. "Lieutenant, I'm going to be direct. The Security Council has voted. They're shutting down the exchange program." "They can't do that. We have treaties, agreements, which they're invoking emergency powers to suspend. The protests aren't just 3 colonies anymore, Dalton. It's spreading. 70% of baseline humanity now believes the perception exchange is dangerous. They want the embassy closed and all exchange participants quarantined for psychological evaluation." Liz's hand tightened on Greg's. He felt her presence in expanded perception, sensed the alarm rippling through the Vekthari consensus as they monitored the conversation. "Admiral, we're making progress. Real, measurable progress toward mutual understanding." "I know, and that's what scares them." Morrison's expression was pained. "The people who've done exchanges come back changed. They talk differently, think differently. Some are requesting permanent posting out here because they can't reintegrate with normal human society. To baseline humanity, that looks like losing people, not gaining understanding. The Vekthari are experiencing the same resistance," Liz said, her voice carefully modulated for human hearing. "Our consensus is fracturing. Traditionalists demand we cease all contact and return to isolation. They claim interaction with humanity is destroying what makes us Vekthari." Morrison nodded grimly. then we're looking at the same problem from both sides. The question is what we do about it. Greg's mind raced. 3 months of work, thousands of successful exchanges, real friendships forming between species. All of it about to collapse because both sides were too afraid of change. We need to show them it's worth it, he said. Something big enough that fear can't override the potential. Like what? We've already demonstrated peaceful coexistence. We've shared technology, art, science. What else is there? Greg looked at Liz. She looked back, and in that moment of shared perception, they both understood what had to happen. A crisis. Liz said quietly. Something that requires both species working together. Something that proves integration makes us stronger, not weaker. You want to manufacture an emergency? Morrison's voice was sharp. That's insane. Not manufacture, Greg said. But there are real threats in this sector. The Dominion is still active. The Hive Collective hasn't forgotten humanity exists. If we could demonstrate that human-vectory cooperation can solve problems neither species could handle alone. His words died as every alarm in the embassy shrieked to life simultaneously. Fletcher's voice cut through the chaos. Multiple contacts dropping out of FTL. Configuration matches Dominion assault patterns. Count is 70-plus ships and climbing. They're broadcasting a demand for immediate human surrender. Greg stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The Dominion. Here. Now. Lys's skin erupted in warning patterns. This is not coincidence. They have been watching, waiting for human defenses to be divided. Morson's face had gone pale. The Prometheus group is strong, but we can't handle 70 Dominion warships. We need time to get reinforcements. Time you do not have, Liz said. She turned to Greg, and he saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Resolve mixed with terrible risk. The Vecthari fleet can engage. But our ships are designed for dimensional warfare, not conventional combat. We will be slaughtered in direct confrontation. Unless you fight together, Greg said, understanding crystallizing. Human ships for conventional warfare, Vecthari ships for dimensional tactics, integrated command using the perception bridge. That's never been tested in combat, Fletcher protested. The lag time alone could be catastrophic. Then we test it now. Greg pulled up the tactical interface, his enhanced perception letting him process the Dominion formation in ways baseline humans couldn't. Or we watch both our species get destroyed while we're too afraid to trust each other. Morrison stared at him through the screen. At Liz. At the tactical display showing an armada bearing down on them. She made her choice. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison. Prepare for integrated combat operations with Vecthari forces. If you've done perception exchange training, you're now combat liaisons. Everyone else, stand by for the weirdest battle coordination you've ever experienced. The War Council assembled in 17 dimensions, and humanity learned what it meant to fight beside gods. Asterisk file name. Asterisk, she didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable.txt. The Dominion fleet opened fire first. Greg felt the attack through both human and Vecthari perceptions simultaneously. In normal space, it was a coordinated barrage of plasma lances and kinetic missiles. In expanded dimensions, it was a wave of causality disruption meant to collapse probability fields and erase ships from multiple timelines at once. The Prometheus shuddered as her shields absorbed the initial strike. Human point defense systems screamed to life, intercepting missiles with precision that would have been impossible without Vecthari observers feeding trajectory data through the perception bridge. All Vecthari vessels, dimensional scatter pattern gamma, Liz commanded. Her consciousness stretched across 17 ships simultaneously. Greg felt the strain through their connection. She was pushing herself beyond safe limits. The Vecthari fleet vanished, not retreating, existing in dimensional space where Dominion weapons couldn't track them. They circled the enemy formation like sharks, striking from angles that didn't exist in three-dimensional geometry. A Dominion cruiser exploded as Vecthari weaponry tore through its hull from inside its own past. That's impossible, Fletcher breathed, watching the tactical display. That's Vecthari warfare, Greg replied. They don't just shoot at where you are, they shoot at where you were and will be simultaneously. But the Dominion adapted fast. Their ships began emitting chronometric dampening fields, forcing Vecthari vessels back into normal space where they were vulnerable. A Vecthari destroyer materialized directly in front of a Dominion dreadnought and was vaporized before it could jump away. Greg felt the death through Liss. Felt her scream echo across the Vecthari consensus. 300 lives snuffed out in an instant, their multi-dimensional perceptions collapsing into void. They are learning our patterns, Liss said through gritted teeth. We cannot maintain dimensional advantage. Then we change tactics. Morrison's voice cut through the battle chatter. Vecthari ships fall back to human formations. We'll provide conventional cover while you coordinate temporal strikes. Hit them from the past while we hit them from the present. It was radical, dangerous, required trust that 3 months ago didn't exist between their species. But it worked. Human ships formed protective screens around Vecthari vessels, absorbing fire while their dimensional partners calculated probability matrices. When Vecthari ships struck, they did so from positions the Dominion couldn't predict, because human tactical doctrine kept changing the engagement parameters. The Dominion fleet lost cohesion. They'd prepared for fighting humans or Vecthari separately, not both simultaneously, using integrated tactics that leveraged the strengths of each species. Greg coordinated from the embassy, his expanded perception letting him track both fleets at once. He fed targeting data to Morrison while processing dimensional calculations from Liss. His consciousness existed in 5 realities simultaneously, and the strain was starting to fracture his sense of self. Dalton, you're hemorrhaging, Dr. Hayes warned over a private channel. Your neural integration is redlining. You need to pull back. Can't. If I disconnect, the command structure collapses. If you don't disconnect, your brain will. Greg ignored her. The battle was shifting. Dominion ships were breaking formation, trying to retreat. But Liss had predicted this. Vecthari vessels had already jumped to where the Dominion would flee, creating a temporal trap that existed before the enemy even decided to run. 20 Dominion ships jumped to FTL and ran directly into Vecthari weapons that had been waiting there for the past 3 minutes. The slaughter was absolute. Remaining Dominion forces are requesting terms, Fletcher reported, his voice stunned. They're offering unconditional surrender. Morrison appeared on screen, smoke visible in her command center. The Prometheus had taken heavy damage but survived. Terms accepted. All ships, cease fire, secure the prisoners, and prepare for... She stopped mid-sentence. Her expression shifted from relief to horror. Admiral? Greg prompted. Long-range sensors just detected another wave. This one's not Dominion. Morrison pulled up a tactical overlay that made Greg's enhanced vision swim with impossible geometry. It's the Hive Collective, 70 ships. No, 90. They're still jumping in. Liss's presence flared with alarm. They have been coordinating with the Dominion. The first attack was meant to weaken us for the second. Our ships are damaged, Morrison said flatly. Ammunition depleted. We can't fight another engagement like that. Neither can the Vecthari, Liss admitted. Dimensional warfare consumes resources exponentially. My fleet needs 12 hours to recover full combat capability. We don't have 12 hours. Greg watched the Hive ships arrange themselves in attack formation. We have maybe 12 minutes. The tactical situation was impossible. 2 fleets, exhausted and depleted, facing a fresh enemy that had studied their integration tactics and would be prepared for them. Conventional wisdom said retreat was the only option. But retreating meant abandoning the embassy, abandoning the perception bridge technology, abandoning 3 months of work that proved different species could unite. There's one option left, Liss said quietly. Full resonance integration. Not just perception bridge. Complete merger of consciousness across both fleets. Human tactical instinct merged with Vecthari dimensional awareness. We become a single fighting force operating as one mind. That's never been tested, Hayes protested. The neural feedback could kill everyone involved. And the Hive Collective will definitely kill everyone if we do nothing. Morrison's face was carved from stone. Liz, if I authorize this, what percentage of participants do you estimate will survive with their individual consciousness intact? I cannot predict. This has never been attempted at this scale. Best guess. Liz met her eyes. 40%, maybe less. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 60% casualties minimum just from attempting the integration. All ships, Morrison said slowly. This is Admiral Kate Morrison. I am requesting volunteers for an experimental combat protocol. Full neural integration with Vecthori fleet consciousness. The risks are... All ships volunteering, Fletcher interrupted. Every single one, Admiral. They're saying if we're going to die anyway, might as well die proving humans and Vecthari are stronger together. Morrison's eyes glistened. Vectari consensus, do you accept? Greg felt Liz reach out across dimensions, felt the consensus deliberate at speeds human thought couldn't match, felt them weigh the cost against the potential. We accept, Liz said. Beginning full resonance integration in 30 seconds. All participants, open your minds. Greg had experienced Vectari perception before, touched the edges of their collective consciousness. But this was different. This wasn't visiting. This was merging. His sense of self exploded outward. Suddenly, he wasn't just Greg Dalton. He was also Captain Ryan Fletcher on the Defiant, Lieutenant Sarah Park on the Meridian, Admiral Morrison on the Prometheus. He was 300 human officers across 70 ships, all thinking and feeling simultaneously. And he was Vectari. Thousands of them. Ancient minds that had witnessed galaxies form. Young consciousnesses fresh from birthing pools. Liz at the center of it all, holding the integration together through sheer force of will. Together, they were something new. Something that had never existed in the universe's 14 billion year history. They were legion. They were unity. They were possibility made manifest. The Hive Collective opened fire, and humanity's first war as a unified consciousness began. Asterisk, file name. Asterisk, she didn't laugh when I said I liked her. She did something unthinkable.txt. The merged consciousness didn't think in words anymore. It thought in pure tactical mathematics, processed across 17 dimensions simultaneously. The Hive Collective attacked with the coordinated precision they were famous for. Every ship moved in perfect synchronization, their collective intelligence optimizing every firing solution. They'd assimilated hundreds of species across 3 galaxies. They knew how to fight, but they'd never fought this. Human instinct married to Vecthari perception created something the Hive couldn't predict. The merged fleet moved like a single organism, but one that could exist in multiple time frames at once. Ships dodged fire that hadn't been fired yet. Weapons struck targets before they arrived at firing positions. Greg experienced it all through thousands of perspectives. He felt Morrison's tactical brilliance flowing through Vecthari probability calculations, felt Fletcher's aggressive combat instincts amplified by dimensional awareness, felt young Lieutenant Park's creative thinking spawn entirely new tactical paradigms that neither species had conceived separately. A Hive dreadnought fired a graviton beam meant to crush the Prometheus into a singularity. But the merged consciousness had predicted the shot 4 seconds before it was fired. The Prometheus existed in that moment, both where it was and where it would need to be, superimposed across time until the beam passed harmlessly through empty space. Then Vecthari destroyers materialized inside the dreadnought's past and destroyed it before it had fired. The Hive adapted. Their collective intelligence recognized the threat and started fragmenting their ships across random probability fields, trying to make their actions unpredictable. But the merged consciousness was faster. Human intuition filled the gaps that Vecthari mathematics couldn't calculate. Vecthari temporal awareness covered the blind spots in human tactical thinking. Another Hive cruiser died, then 3 more. Then an entire formation. Greg felt the strain building across the integration. Thousands of minds operating as one generated heat, friction, psychological pressure that human neurology wasn't designed to handle. He felt officers starting to crack, their sense of self dissolving into the collective. Hayes was right. The casualties were mounting. Not physical deaths, but psychological ones. Minds fragmenting under the load. We cannot sustain this. Lys's voice echoed through the merged consciousness. Integration is degrading. We have perhaps 3 minutes before mass neural collapse. Then we end this in 3 minutes. Morrison's presence thundered across the network. All ships, pattern Omega. We're going to show the Hive what real unity looks like. The merged fleet condensed, ships drawing closer in both physical and dimensional space. The integration deepened, became more complete, more dangerous. Greg felt himself dissolving. Greg Dalton was becoming a memory, a fragment of something larger. He was everyone and no one. The terror of losing himself fought against the ecstasy of perfect connection. Then he felt Lys anchor him. Her presence wrapped around his fragmenting consciousness, holding him together even as she managed thousands of other minds simultaneously. Stay with me, her voice whispered through dimensions. I need you to be you. The merged consciousness struck as one. Not 90 ships, not thousands of individuals. One single attack launched from every possible angle across 17 dimensions. The Hive Collective's formation shattered. Their coordination broke. For the first time in their species' history, they experienced something their collective intelligence couldn't overcome. They experienced fear. Hive vessels are breaking off. Fletcher's voice came through, distant but clear. They're retreating. All of them. They're running. The merged consciousness held for another 10 seconds, watching the Hive fleet jump to FTL in complete disarray. Then Lys began the separation. It felt like dying. Greg screamed as his consciousness was torn from thousands of others and forced back into the prison of a single body. He felt every officer experiencing the same agony. Felt Victhari minds crying out at the sudden isolation after perfect unity. The separation took 47 seconds. When it ended, Greg Dalton existed alone in his own head for the first time in what felt like years. He immediately vomited. "Around the embassy!" Alarms shrieked. Medical alerts flooded the channels. Hayes was shouting orders, trying to coordinate emergency response for thousands of officers simultaneously experiencing severe neurological trauma. Casualty report. Morrison's voice came through, barely recognizable. She sounded like she'd aged 20 years. Fletcher answered, his words slurred. 63% of human participants are non-responsive. Neural shock. The Vecthari. I can't get solid numbers. Their casualties are higher. Greg forced himself upright, his vision swimming. Through the observation window, he could see Vecthari ships floating dead in space, not destroyed, just empty. Their crews' minds had burned out from the strain of integration. "Lys?" he called out, his voice cracking. No response. Panic cut through the neurological fog. Greg staggered through the embassy, using walls for support. His expanded perception was gone, collapsed back to normal human baseline. The loss felt like blindness. He found her in the central chamber. Her form had destabilized, cycling through shapes uncontrollably. The patterns on her skin were chaotic, meaningless. Lys. She turned toward his voice, and Greg saw what the integration had cost her. She'd held thousands of minds together, human and Vecthari, while also coordinating combat across multiple dimensions. The strain had broken something fundamental in her consciousness. "Greg," her voice was fractured, coming from multiple timelines at once. I am everywhere, everywhen. The integration will not release me." He reached for her, but his hands passed through her shifting form. Dying. She was becoming unstuck from linear time, experiencing every moment of her existence simultaneously. "Dr. Hayes!" Greg shouted into his comm. "I need help in the central chamber now." Hayes arrived with a medical team 30 seconds later. She took one look at Lys and her face went pale. She's experiencing temporal dissolution. Her consciousness is spreading across her entire timeline. If we don't stabilize her in the next few minutes, she'll cease to exist as a discrete entity. How do we stabilize her? I don't know. This is beyond anything we've treated before. Greg stared at Lys's fragmenting form, felt the echo of what they'd shared during the negotiation, during the battle, during 3 months of building something impossible together. He'd been inside her mind, knew how she perceived reality. Knew that Vekthari consciousness operated through resonance patterns. She needs an anchor, he said. Something to pull her back to linear time. We don't have the technology for. We don't need technology. Greg stepped closer to Lys's unstable form. We have connection. Hayes grabbed his arm. Dalton, you're still recovering from integration shock. Your neural pathways are compromised. If you try to establish resonance with her in this state, you could both end up dissolved across time. Then that's what happens. Greg pulled free. She held me together during the battle. Now I hold her together. He reached for Lys again, but this time he didn't try to touch her physically. Instead, he reached with his mind, searching for the resonance patterns they'd established over 3 months of constant contact. He found fragments, pieces of Lys scattered across time. He saw her as she was centuries ago, young and idealistic. Saw her during the wars that had hardened the Vekthari into conquerors. Saw her the moment she'd first seen him and felt that impossible spark of recognition. Saw her dying across infinite timelines, her consciousness eroding into quantum foam. Greg grabbed those fragments and pulled, not with physical strength, with will, with the connection they'd built. With something that might have been love, or might have been something evolution hadn't created words for yet. Come back, he whispered across dimensions. Come back to now. Come back to me. Lys's form flickered, stabilized for a microsecond, fragmented again. Greg held on, felt his own consciousness starting to dissolve. F-time pulling at him, trying to scatter him across infinity the way it was scattering Lys. Then he felt something else. Thousands of presences, every officer who'd participated in the integration, every Vekthari who'd survived. They were reaching out, adding their resonance to his. Fletcher was there, Morrison, Hayes, Park, hundreds of humans he'd shared consciousness with for those perfect, terrible minutes. And the Vekthari consensus, billions of minds focusing their collective will on pulling one of their own back from dissolution. You are not alone, the consensus spoke through the bridge. Neither of you. Hold on. The combined resonance intensified. Greg felt it like gravity, like magnetism, like every fundamental force in physics working in concert to anchor two consciousnesses to a single moment in time. Lys's form solidified. Became humanoid again, stable. She collapsed into Greg's arms, and this time he could hold her, could feel her solid and real and present. That was extremely inadvisable, she murmured, against his chest. Yeah, Greg's legs gave out. They both sank to the floor, exhausted beyond measure. Seems to be our specialty. Around them! The embassy lights flickered. Systems struggled to maintain function after the massive energy drain of the battle and integration. But they held. Just like everything else they'd built together. Held against all odds. 6 weeks later, Greg stood before the United Earth Assembly. His hands shook slightly as he approached the podium, but he kept his voice steady. The chamber held representatives from every major human colony. Behind them, holographic feeds connected billions of viewers across explored space. This wasn't just testimony. It was judgment. Lieutenant Dalton. Speaker Amanda Cross said from the central dais, "You stand accused of reckless endangerment, unauthorized military integration with an alien species, and willfully exceeding your authority as a diplomatic officer. How do you plead?" "Guilty on all counts," Greg said simply. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Cross raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to defend yourself?" "No point. Everything you said is factually accurate. I made choices that put human lives at risk. I authorized protocols that hadn't been tested. I exceeded my authority because the situation demanded it. 63% casualties among integration participants," Cross read from her data screen. "Permanent neurological damage. 17 ships critically damaged. 17 ships critically damaged. And you feel no remorse?" "I didn't say that." Greg's voice hardened. "I carry every one of those casualties. I dream about them every night, but I'd make the same choice again because the alternative was extinction." "That's not for you to decide." "Then who decides?" Politicians safe on Earth who've never faced a Dominion assault fleet? Committees that debate for months while people die? Greg stepped closer to the dais. I was there. I saw what was coming, and I chose survival over protocol. A new voice cut through the chamber. If I may address the assembly. Admiral Morrison walked through the main entrance, still moving with a slight limp from her injuries. She'd spent 3 weeks in medical recovery and had only been cleared for limited duty yesterday. Cross looked surprised. Admiral, you're scheduled to testify tomorrow. I'm testifying now. Morrison mounted the steps to stand beside Greg. This assembly is preparing to court-martial Lieutenant Dalton for actions I authorized. If he's guilty, so am I. So is Captain Fletcher. So is everyone who participated in the integration. The assembly recognizes that command decisions were made under duress, Cross said carefully. But Lieutenant Dalton initiated the entire sequence of events. His initial interaction with the Vecthari emissary created this situation. His initial interaction prevented a war, Morrison corrected. And his subsequent actions won 2 battles we had no right to survive. You want to punish him for being effective? Fine. But understand what you're actually doing. You're telling every officer in the fleet that innovation is punishable. That adaptation is criminal. That when faced with impossible situations, they should follow protocol and die rather than improvise and live. The chamber erupted in argument. Representatives shouted over each other, half calling for mercy, half demanding accountability. Cross hammered for order. When silence finally returned, she looked at Greg with something that might have been sympathy. Lieutenant, the Vecthari have submitted a formal request. They want you transferred to permanent diplomatic posting at the Joint Embassy. They claim you're essential to maintaining the integration program. Cross paused. They also submitted something else. A declaration of pair bonding. Do you know what that means? Greg's stomach dropped. He looked toward the observation gallery where Liz sat in her human-compatible form. She met his eyes with an expression he'd learned to read over the past month. It means she's claimed me as a permanent partner, Greg said quietly. In Vecthari culture, pair bonding is a merging of life paths. Where she goes, I go. What threatens her, threatens me. And you accept this? I accepted it 6 weeks ago when I pulled her back from temporal disillusion. More murmurs. Gross silenced them with a gesture. The assembly needs to understand what we're dealing with. This isn't just diplomatic cooperation anymore. It's integration at a personal level. Lieutenant Dalton is effectively becoming the first human Vecthari hybrid consciousness. Not the first, Morrison interjected. There are 47 other officers who've undergone similar bonding since the battle. The integration opened doors that can't be closed. Some humans want deeper connection with Vecthari partners. Some Vecthari want the same with humans. And you don't see the danger in that? Cross demanded. In 50 years, will there even be distinct human and Vecthari species? Or will we have merged into something else entirely? Maybe, Greg said, or maybe we'll be something better, stronger, capable of facing threats neither species could handle alone. That's not your decision to make for all humanity. You're right, it's not. But it's also not your decision to forbid it. Greg pulled out a data chip and placed it on the podium. This contains testimony from every surviving integration participant. Every single one volunteered. Every single one would do it again. You can court-martial me, exile me, execute me if you want, but you can't undo what we've proven. Humans and Vecthari are compatible. We can unite without one species consuming the other, and that terrifies you more than the Dominion or the Hive ever could. Cross stared at the chip. Why does it terrify us, Lieutenant? Because it means change. Not just new technology or new territories, but fundamental transformation of what it means to be human. And humans have always been better at fighting than adapting. That's not fair, no, but it's honest. The chamber fell silent. Greg could feel billions of eyes on him through the holographic feeds. This moment would define humanity's future. Either they'd embrace connection with the Vecthari or retreat into isolation. Cross finally spoke. The assembly will take a recess to deliberate. Lieutenant Dalton, you're dismissed until we reach a verdict. Greg descended from the podium. Morrison gripped his shoulder as he passed. You did good, son. Tell me that after they decide my sentence. He made his way to the observation gallery where Liz waited. She took his hand without speaking, her skin warm and solid. Together they walked to a private antechamber where Fletcher and Hayes were waiting. "That went better than expected," Fletcher said. "Or worse," Hayes countered. "Cross looked ready to throw you into a singularity." "She's scared," Greg said. "They all are. The integration proved we can merge consciousness with aliens. That's either humanity's greatest achievement or our biggest mistake, and nobody knows which yet." "The Vecthari consensus has reached a conclusion," Liz said quietly. "If Earth rejects the embassy program, we will withdraw. Not in anger, in respect for your species' autonomy. But the opportunity will not come again. You'd really walk away? We would have to. Forced connection is assimilation. We learned that lesson the hard way." Liz squeezed his hand. "But I would not walk away from you. Pair bonding transcends politics. Where you go, I follow." Greg pulled her close. In the week since the battle, they'd navigated the impossible terrain of cross-species partnership, learning how to communicate when one partner existed in 17 dimensions and the other in 4, finding compromise between human emotional directness and Vectari resonance patterns. It was messy, complicated, often frustrating. It was also the most real thing Greg had ever experienced. "Whatever they decide," he said, "we face it together." "Together," Liz agreed. The assembly deliberated for 6 hours. Greg spent them in the antechamber, watching news feeds debate his fate. Opinion was split almost perfectly down the middle. Half of humanity saw him as a hero who'd prevented extinction. The other half saw him as a traitor who'd sold humanity's future for alien approval. Both were partially right. When the summons finally came, Greg walked back into the chamber with Liz beside him. Morrison, Fletcher, and Hayes followed. Whatever judgment came, they'd face it as a unit. Cross looked exhausted. "Lieutenant Dalton, the Assembly has reached a decision. By a vote of 51 to 49, with 13 abstentions, you are found guilty of exceeding your authority. You are hereby stripped of military rank and dishonorably discharged from Earth Defense Forces." Greg's heart sank. Dishonorable discharge meant no pension, no benefits, no recognition of his service. "However," Cross continued, "the Assembly also recognizes the value of your actions. While we cannot condone your methods, we acknowledge they prevented catastrophic loss of human life. Therefore, you are simultaneously being appointed as Earth's first ambassador of integration, reporting directly to this Assembly." Greg blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "You're fired from the military and hired by the diplomatic corps in the same breath." Morrison whispered behind him. "Congratulations! You broke their brains so badly they created a new position just for you." Cross allowed herself a thin smile. "The embassy program will continue under strict oversight. Integration protocols will be voluntary and regulated. Ambassador Dalton, your job is to make sure both species benefit from this partnership without either one being absorbed into the other. Think you can handle that?" Greg looked at Liz, at Morrison, at Fletcher and Hayes, at the impossible coalition they'd built from desperation and hope. "Yes, Speaker Cross, I can handle that. Then this assembly is adjourned. And Dalton," Cross leaned forward, "don't make me regret this. No promises." Outside the assembly chamber, reporters swarmed. Greg ignored them, walking hand in hand with Liz toward the transport platform. They had an embassy to return to, work to continue, a future to build. "So," Liz said as they boarded the shuttle, "Ambassador of Integration, how does it feel, terrifying you?" "The same. The consensus has appointed me as emissary of resonance. Apparently we both get to navigate impossible diplomatic waters together. Could be worse." "How?" Greg smiled. "We could be doing it alone." The shuttle lifted off, carrying them toward the stars. Behind them, Earth debated and argued and slowly, painfully adapted to a universe where humans weren't meant to stand apart. Ahead of them, the joint embassy waited. And beyond that, an entire galaxy full of species who would soon learn what humanity and the Vecthari had proven. That different didn't mean incompatible. That connection was stronger than isolation. That sometimes the most unthinkable thing was also the most necessary. And that it all started with 4 simple words spoken in a moment of honest vulnerability.